Everyone, and welcome to Behind the Numbers. My name is Dave Bookbinder, and I am your host of the show where we dig deeper to understand what really matters most in business. Today, I'm excited to have a guest that's a friend, a colleague, a collaborator. His name is Steve Kantor. He's Executive Vice President at KEH Insurance. And today, we're going to have a very interesting conversation about managing risk and other stuff. Steve, welcome to Behind the Numbers.
Thank you, Dave. It's great to be here.
I want you to set the stage here by just telling the audience a little bit about who you are.
I'm Steve Kantor, Executive Vice President of KEH Insurance. And in addition to serving in that capacity at KEH Insurance, I am also founder of multiple CEO forums where I bring together investors and founders of very innovative companies.
Yeah, and that's probably the biggest reason I wanted you to come on this program. Yes, your insurance knowledge is absolutely insightful, and we're going to be getting into that. But the fact that you have these community groups that you've built, where you've got these leaders, and we're going to talk about that, takes your game and your impact to a completely different level, and the ability for you to convey some of the things that you've seen and experienced in those groups to share with our audience is going to be just super invaluable. So let's start by just talking about business insurance and understanding coverage. Get the blocking and tackling stuff out of the way, if you will, kind of table stakes, if you will, Steve.
Sounds good. Where would you like me to start, Dave, in speaking of business?
High level. Just help the audience understand what they should be thinking about in terms of their ability to properly understand coverage for
So I
small and
think,
middle market companies.
I think what I often say to my clients when we first meet is there is what I call the have-tos of insurance and the shoulds. And I think the have-tos, especially when we're talking about early stage companies that the event leading to the conversation about insurance is a lease. And in the lease, they have a requirement to have certain insurance in place to be compliant with their lease. So that would fall under the have tos. The shoulds is where hopefully the value of someone that does what I do as an insurance agent or broker comes into play. Because on the should side, that becomes more of a CEO or investor that's speaking about, Steve, protect us, talk to us, educate us. And that's when we get into beyond the have tos, the workers' compensation, which is a statutory coverage. The law says you have to have it, or a contract. Again, normally that's a lease, and that would be the general liability, typically the workers' compensation, hired non-owned auto. Those typically are what we see in a lease. And then the shoulds are other types of insurance, which we can talk about today.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about them for sure as we get into this conversation a little bit further. But before we go any further, I want to just talk about what you just discussed. And those things aren't like set it and forget it types of issues, right? As companies evolve, as they grow, their risk profile changes. How should business owners and leaders be thinking about that?
They should be thinking about it all the time. And what I often say to my clients is you want to think about the concept of developing a professional advisory committee or professional advisory board, which we often will say should be your lawyer, your accountant, as well as us. And we should be meeting at least 2 times a year, if not more frequently, maybe quarterly, depending upon the profile of the company. And that gives us an opportunity to stay on top of the changing risk profile. So, what are some of the things that would change your risk profile? Some of the basics include opening another location, adding products, adding services, forming joint ventures, adding new employees with different skill sets, going outside of North America into other countries, adding intellectual property to your asset base, or what is commonly referred in the accounting world as your intangible assets. So those are some of the things that we would look at as far as your risk profile. And it's not set it and forget it. It's set it and let's monitor it and change it as things change.
Yeah, and as somebody in the valuation space who deals a lot with the intangible assets, I can tell you that most companies now, the way they're comprised, their assets are more intangible assets than they are tangible assets anymore.
There's no question. What we see so frequently is people really understanding their intellectual property or not understanding it. Um, Customer lists, that's intellectual property. So protecting your client lists, and certainly any sort of patent portfolio, copyrights, trademarks, trade secrets, how you treat them are all part of those intangible assets. And how you protect them becomes part of what you should be doing with your insurance advisor.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's funny how our worlds overlap. We've talked so many times. We never really got into, I guess, the meat and potatoes of what we do day to day to this kind of granularity. But in my world, every one of those intangible assets you just mentioned are things that we identify regularly in business combinations, and buyers ascribe tremendous value to those intangible assets. And oftentimes, when they're looking to buy your business, they're looking specifically at that IP profile that you have.
There's no question. What we see frequently, especially when it comes to individuals that don't have experience in transactions, is what we refer to as transactional risk. And one of the things that adds to the risk of a transaction, most common one we'll talk about, is buying a business or selling a business. So the basics, falling into your world, Dave, would be the valuation of the asset. Are we buying it at the right number? Are we selling at the right number? A part of having the discussion in preparation for a transaction has to be insurance. And where insurance comes into the conversation, the most basic advice I have to offer is do it early. Don't wait until the week before closing. Call your insurance advisor and say, I forgot to tell you, we're buying this company, we're selling our company. Um, that's where problems happen. So as proactively as possible, you want to bring your insurance advisor into that conversation. One of the things that I'll often share with folks that are in the business of advising investors is that as part of due diligence, what we want to look at is what's referred to as loss runs. We want to look at what types of claims have the company we're buying, what have they experienced? Have they had numerous lawsuits from employees, ex-employees? If so, what's being done about it? Are we buying a toxic company? Have we received lawsuits from a competitor? Multiple lawsuits from competitors? That should be coming out as part of the disclosure statements from the seller, but we certainly will see it when we look at loss runs. It's a very important part of a transaction.
Yeah, an emphasis on proactive communication. That's it's critical in everything we do in business. Um, Steve, I want to shift gears a little bit here because we talk about business. You like to say that business is personal. I personally agree with you on that. And you've built the communities, and I can see those posters behind you that reflect the life sciences and tech leaders. I want you to talk a little bit about the groups and what inspired you to build them.
I'll start with the latter part of your question. I just continue to live by the fact that, or the theory that no one woke up this morning looking forward to speaking with the insurance guy.
I
So
did.
I thank you. So I thought it was really important to bring value in the relationships that I build with clients, referral sources of business, and building community. And um, my focus in working with innovative companies and their investors is to think about what's important to those stakeholders. So, what's important to an investor? One thing is trying to identify quality companies early quality entrepreneurs early to invest early. So you're putting your dollars to work at a low valuation and getting a great opportunity. So if I can help them identify great companies and great entrepreneurs, I'm bringing value. Conversely, if I'm working with early stage founders and they're now ready to get capitalized and seek some outside funding, if I can be a source or a resource for helping people identify check writers, then I'm bringing value. The other part of all this is when I sit in rooms frequently involving where the participants are the investors and they're the founders, I learn. I learn all the time. I learn about what are the issues that impact these types of companies. And then finally, a lot of times these individuals haven't had an opportunity to meet with great advisors. So if they've never bought a company before or sold a company before, chances are in your world, Dave, maybe they've never met a valuation expert. What is the role that valuation expert can offer them as an entrepreneur or as an investor? So identifying the right valuation people, accounting advisors, legal advisors, that type of thing. And then we'll even get more granular into the HR issues. All of it also impacts the risk profile. So I wanted to build these groups because I wanted to build my base of contacts that ultimately become my clients. So that was the inspiration for doing it. The areas, two primary areas I focused on are where we see a lot of companies that are being built for scalability. So I often use the example of two guys that sell sunglasses on the boardwalk in Atlantic City are probably not really interested in speaking to me because they just want the have-to insurance. Whatever their landlords say they need, that's what they're going to get to open their doors and have a lifestyle business. They get cash from that business and that's their focus. On a scalable business, typically a scalable company that has intellectual property, we've got small companies today, and if they're working, they're going to get pretty big pretty fast because we're commercializing the intellectual property. And those types of companies tend to be in technology. So my first group I started 16 years ago is called the Technology Leaders of the Delaware Valley. And my second group was started about 13 years ago, is called the Life Sciences Collaborative. And both groups involve founders and investors in those industries.
Yep. And the life sciences group, that's what, Boston based?
So we have 3 chapters today. We have a chapter in Boston. We have a chapter in New Jersey. Typically, that chapter meets in the Princeton area. And then we have our third chapter that we call our Pennsylvania chapter, typically meets in the Philadelphia region, King of Prussia, Bluebell, Center City. Each of the groups meet monthly, and we have no sponsors and no one pays to be a member. It's just about commitment. The root or the culture of the group is education. What I always say to people is business owners have to manage time, and time is critical. So if you get a CEO or an investor to take time out of their normal day to attend a meeting, it better be something that is valuable. And to me, value was peer-to-peer learning. And if these folks are developing relationships that are helping them become better business people, then they'll return. And so we've been incredibly successful in building these communities, both the Technology Leaders of the Delaware Valley, the Life Sciences Collaborative, and my third group, which was started about 3+ years ago, is called Innovators and Investors. And Innovators and Investors was built because so many of my members in the two other communities had exits, and now they were becoming rich. And I found that wealthy people, they're still the same. They still just love business, but they don't want to be solicited the way they often are in traditional network type meetings or industry conferences. So Innovators and Investors was born, and members of that group are basically from Boston to Florida, and we
That's
meet.
amazing. Really, really, really good stuff. And that's, again, one of the main reasons why I wanted you to come on this program, because of that background and your philosophy about giving back and business being personal. And the longevity of these groups certainly speak to the fact that you're obviously bringing great value and content. I personally have attended a number of the tech leaders meetings, and I can tell you it's the same faces that are showing up month to month. And there's lively conversation, and clearly you're bringing value because, like you said, they wouldn't come back if there wasn't value. So good on you for all
Thank
of
you.
that and your contributions. When we get to the end of the program, Steve, I'll ask you how people can contact you. But while we're on this topic of the groups, are they open to anybody in the audience? If anybody's listening and is interested in learning more about that, are the groups available for joining?
They are, as long as the individual meets the profile, the basic profile of they lead a company in the respective area, or they invest in a company in the respective area. So certainly anyone in the private equity or venture world, angel world, would qualify, and anyone that is building or on the board of a company in tech, medical device, therapeutics, nutraceutical, those types of spaces would all qualify to be in the group. And to remain in the group, the only thing that we ask is for people to make a commitment. We want them to come, because the value that I hear back from people is they develop strong relationships with other members. It's almost like we become an ad hoc advisory board
Yeah.
for the members. And oftentimes people will ask me, they don't say it, so I bring it up. Do they have to be a client of mine to be in the group? And the answer is no. I certainly want them to be my client, and I hope over time that they will. But it is not a prerequisite. Um, and I think that makes it better for all involved, because the value and the success is by getting perspective from so many different people and their experience in leading and growing and investing in companies.
Yeah, hopefully this will open floodgates for you, and you'll be inundated with folks who are interested in joining. I would just add, make sure that if they meet all the minimum criteria, that they also have a good sense of humor. Because what I've seen in my experience is the egos are checked at the door, and these are just basically a great group of human beings who are getting together.
Thank you. And it is true. I often say, sometimes when I look around the rooms that I build, I don't qualify to be in the room based on the incredible accomplishments of some of our members. Um, but I certainly do know my role, and I am the catalyst. I am the leader. And as part of being the catalyst and the leader, I try to make it fun and light. And that includes checking your ego at the door, because no one's going to be impressed by some of the kind of chest banging that often goes on at these things. We don't allow it. Everyone has struggled to keep the lights on for the most part. Everyone has struggled to make payroll. People have struggled with fights with partners, employees, and unless you've gone through that, it's hard to participate in the conversation. So that's why we want people to fit a certain profile. And when they do, they can also relate to the conversation and contribute to the discussions.
Oh yeah, for sure. I want to shift gears back to the areas of insurance that maybe folks should be thinking about. And one of the topics that's ubiquitous really is artificial intelligence. How does AI impact risk, Steve?
We're seeing it today, Dave, and some of it is untested. In particular, if you think about coverage, insurance coverage is a contract. It's an agreement between the carrier and the insured or the policyholder. And it spells out what is the definition of the insured, What is an event that could trigger a claim? And when we think about, for example, product liability, or we think about directors and officers insurance, we're looking at companies that are very innovative, and they built their value off of their ownership of the innovative product. So one of the very, very basic questions is, do you really own the product? Because if you go to commercialize a product, meaning you've built it, now you got to try to sell it and make money from it. The question is, what if someone else claims ownership? Are you prepared to pay the cost to defend yourself against the claim of another that says, great product, but it's mine? And we're starting to see cases like this coming up in the world of AI. Do you truly own the product? Did you truly develop it? Or did it come from public domain? How is a policy going to respond to that? Is there actual coverage? Has it been tested? I recently sat and listened to a gentleman that I would consider one of the leading underwriters in the country at placing directors and officers insurance. And we work very closely with this gentleman through one of our wholesale relationships that we have. And he was a guest speaker in a law firm, and he spoke about a case where an Israeli weight loss company raised a lot of money, speaking about artificial intelligence as part of the value proposition of their product, of their service. And in the end, while I don't know all the details, I'm just summarizing from his presentation. The example that was given was investors sued the company because the company failed. And part of the lawsuit was the claim that the use of AI and its material value in a company, where ultimately the claim was that AI really didn't matter. And therefore the company failed, they were misled, and they were suing. So AI it's going to be interesting how companies are sued, if insurance will cover those types of lawsuits, and how companies de-risk their exposure associated with building companies where AI is at the foundation of their offering.
Yeah, interesting stuff. And I guess in a similar, if not tangential, area, cybersecurity. That's something that's been discussed very often. What are you seeing today in cyber risk?
What we see and say about cyber is it's constantly changing, and nothing is absolutely safe. So cyber policies continue to evolve, and where they started a bunch of years ago when I was newer in the industry, the response from the market was, no one cares about my data, I'm not worried. So
Hmm.
people weren't interested in buying cyber insurance. As more and more people were hit with a cyber event, we started to see insurance companies, what we'll say, throwing into a basic business owner's policy cyber. But what was actually being offered was very limited. So we typically talk to clients about buying what's referred to as a standalone policy. That's a insurance policy that is dedicated specifically to cyber-related risk. We used to talk about the unauthorized disclosure of confidential information, electronic or non-electronic. So cyber coverage today could involve the disgruntled employee at a doctor's office that puts a post on Facebook that says Steve Kantor is suffering from some condition, and posts it on Facebook. That's not an electronic breach, but it is unauthorized disclosure of confidential information. So as social engineering, which is kind of the hacking, or someone being misled, right? You hear about the individual that sends a request to pay an invoice, and the CFO pays the $125,000 and it's an error. Is there coverage for that? That's a social engineering event. So to your question about today we're seeing these social engineering claims as being one of the most common events, and the policies have evolved. So it used to be that if you were buying $1 million policy, it may or may not have social engineering coverage in it. Today, it may have it, but it has what we would call a sublimit. Typically, it's $250,000. So it's very important to your listeners to understand that no two policies are the same. And it's really important to understand sublimits and exclusions or conditions of binding. Many times companies or carriers say you need to have, an example would be multi-factor authentication. It's a type of way of assuring some level of security to minimize the chances of an event happening. Cyber is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
The risk profile is evolving, and the policies typically trail, right? The policies are built around claims covered and not covered. So the next year, another company may come out and say, oh, we're the only company that covers this type of data breach. So insurance trails trends in the marketplace, and cyber is the best example of it.
Yeah, I mean, the bad guys are always trying to find new ways to get to your data. I mean, we at my place, we get videos once a month warning about different types of cyber risk that we face. And, the typical email, the phishing, the smishing in text messages. Lately, it's the replacement of QR codes where you think you're maybe logging into Netflix, but somebody swipes out the QR code. Next thing you
Yes.
know, you're compromised. Um, it's just mind-boggling that these things continue, and the cyber risk just continues to become greater and greater with each passing day.
Constantly evolving. And it's also leads Dave to something that we should touch on, which would be post transaction of an acquisition of a company. So buyer buys a company uh, February 1st, 2025. March 1st, we end up finding out that there was a terrible cyber breach that happened, and the claim is just coming in March. Whose insurance policy covers that?
Hmm.
So this is an example of the reason that buyers and sellers and business people in general should work with an insurance advisor, because these types of risks should be covered unless you fail to manage your insurance through a business transaction. That gets into tail coverage. It gets into lots of conversations about reps and warranty, insurance, as well as on your claims made policies, which tend to be policies like professional liability, directors and officers, employment practices liability, typically are what's called claims made policies. And we're very concerned about the facts around when was a claim reported and when did the event actually occur that gave rise to the claim. They're two really important facts when we're trying to figure out if an insurance policy will respond to a claim. And this matters when it comes to buying and selling companies. These are issues that need to be addressed.
Yeah, so much to consider here. We're almost out of time, Steve, but I want to give you one more opportunity to maybe just talk about any tips or blind spots that you see that people are typically experiencing.
Sure. I think the biggest mistake that gets made in the procurement of insurance comes from the insurance industry, and that is this concept of, hey, give us like 10 minutes if I can save you some money, you'll work with me. Now, while that's a very um, familiar story in the personal side, like buying your home and auto insurance, it usually carries over into the small business world, and it's an awful mistake. So I think it's very, very important reminder that all insurance is not the same, and that understanding your contract or your policy is very important. Number two, whoever you choose to be your advisor should understand what you do for a living. And I think the mistake that often gets made is the insurance agent or broker doesn't really understand the company they're insuring, and the insurance carrier that's quoting the coverage and providing the policy is relying on an application. And what's very, very important, ending with the same thing you mentioned at the beginning, business is personal. Yes, it's about relationships. And in building those relationships as a pure business relationship, it's vital that you feel as a consumer of insurance that your broker and the carrier that's insuring you understands perhaps your unique model. If you don't feel they do, you need to speak up and make sure you demand that everyone understands what you're doing before you bind coverage.
Yep. I'm going to put an exclamation mark on that. And with that, Steve, unfortunately, we are out of time. But before we go, why don't you tell the audience how they can connect with you if they want to learn more about you or work with you or get some more information about your collaborative groups?
Sure. They can come to my personal website. It's just Steven, STVEN Kantor, KANTOR.com. That's my website. And they can also email me at KEH Insurance, which is our agency, and that's SKANTOR at KEH, the number 4INS.com.
And I will have that in the show notes for anybody who is reading along. They can click right on it and get in contact with you. Steve, thanks so much for joining us today on Behind the Numbers.
Thanks for the opportunity, Dave. It was nice speaking with you today. I appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. Insurance conversations are not usually as exciting as this one. It was my pleasure to have Steve Kantor, Executive Vice President from KEH Insurance Agency, on the program today. Again, my name is Dave Bookbinder, and I'm known as a valuation expert. And if you are a business owner and don't know what the value of your business is, we should probably have a conversation. So you can feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Thank you out there for watching and listening. We so appreciate your support. Can't do the program without you. Please hit the subscribe button. Tell a friend about the program. Share it with everyone that you know. We'd love to get the message out about Behind the Numbers as a continuing growing podcast across all platforms. Again, my name is Dave Bookbinder. That's all we have for today, gang. We'll see you next time on Behind the Numbers. Take care.